Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never popped into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And if you saw the title of the live tonight, because I usually put the title in after my live show is over because I'm usually picking a powerful word or I'm in a spiel and I don't even know for myself what that spiel is going to be about. Today, I knew exactly what I was going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be talking about energy today. This is a conversation I don't think I've ever brought to my brand before. Whether or not I'm the right person to be talking about it, I'm not sure, but I can give you a perspective from my own experience in being an energy reader. That is in my hypervigilance that I learned to do this. My safety in my life quite often, I believe, depended on being able to foresee somebody's action or reaction, to see the trip ups and the wrenches being thrown into my life, which have always seemed to be there. I'm not saying, maybe once a month, once every few months. I'm talking about every single day of my life. I was a little bit nervous today about having this conversation because, again, it's not a conversation I've ever brought to the table. I'm not quite sure, like I said, whether I'm the right person to bring this topic to the table. But, like I said, also, I can give it as a perspective of mine and trusting that in the serendipities and in the breadcrumbs of my life, and in specifically my day, that, right, I had no choice. I knew because everything that was coming across my path in the conversations, in the content, in the experiences I was having, even a video that was suggested to me that was by me. And those videos are not normally suggested to me. But when it popped up, I thought, oh my goodness, what has Cindy got to say about this subject of energy? And you know what? Even though I didn't talk about the topic of energy, uh, in that conversation, I could feel and I could see the topics and the insights that I had and that little bit of dancing that I do in these heavy conversations sometimes. These conversations that when I was younger, I would never even have voiced because, I would be considered, putting it mildly, kooky. Um, Maybe because of the stories and the experiences that, I would have to bring to the table to back it up because, it is in that building of trust between us, that we have to be genuine and, you have to be the evidence for anybody to believe anything that you say, right? That I do a lot of dancing around the topic as a young child and as a young adult, even as an older adult. They call it dry bagging. Um, I was brought up to not ask, right? I still do not ask. But in this age of AI learning and having the insights of other people that have maybe not the same experiences, but similar experiences, or they have an experience and they don't know where it came from or why it happened to them. And I'm going, oh, me, let me tell you, right? Because I went through that myself. And that conversation that somebody else is having is the evidence for myself that it's okay, right? That I'm not kooky, that these were truths. And remember what I said, that even in today, just compounded in the topics and in the experiences that came across my path, I just knew that I wasn't going to be let off the hook, that I was going to have to come in with my own experience. Hello, Eugene. I know you're there. Thank you so much for popping in, and thank you so much for giving my live a like. I really appreciate it because I understand that it is in that appreciation. It is in that that showing up, and in that moment we are right. You're adding your energy to my life, and I so appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to bring it back to the main tree, staying on topic because I knew I was talking about it today. And for goodness sake, I went out for one of my walks. You guys all know that I like to go for walks. I like to be in contemplation and reflection with myself. I went and walked in an area that I had never walked in before, and it was magnificent. Oh my goodness, it's a really old area. These days, you would consider it maybe a bad neighborhood because it's pretty rough down there. But they have a gated community, and in this gated community, it's all great big mansions, and they were fixing the road. So I walked down the sidewalk and I walked in there, and oh my goodness, the architecture from the early 1900s, even with all the construction work and everything, oh my goodness, I just fell in love with the neighborhood, and I'm really looking forward to going back in there. But bring it again right back to the main branch. I came home today. My feet were buzzing, right? And it was a good walk. I put it in there, but it was very enjoyable. I got tons of compliments on my dress from Egypt. I can lift up a little bit, can see it's all sparkly. A dress. There you go, Eugene. He's always asking to see my outfits. But yeah, this is a dress that goes right to the ground, and it's embroidered and bejeweled. It's absolutely magnificent. And everywhere as I went today, I got such lovely comments from everybody. And I wore the dress a couple of days ago for Terry Fox Day. I went for a walk down to the forks, but it was really hot, and I hung the dress up, meaning to hand wash it, hang it up. I want to keep it in good shape. But then I thought, maybe if I'm going for a walk today, right? It's hot, it's smoggy, the wildfires are still going crazy, that I'd wear it again, right? And oh my goodness, I must have gotten, I swear, at least 10 people commenting on my dress. And now it pleased me to be able to say, "Oh, it's from Egypt," right? And because for myself, I didn't know where it was from. I thought it was a Hindi dress. I thought it was from India, but that wasn't the case. And so I Google lens the tag, and I found out what the language was, and found out that it was actually made in Egypt. Okay, Cindy, right? We're stalling on the topic. But let's start with some of those breadcrumbs and things that came across my path. I guess, whoever or whatever wanted me to have the courage, right? Because, I was brought up again, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. Lots of times I would be brought down if I would even voice, you know, somebody or point out somebody's unkindness. And you know, I learned to not ask, not to have a voice, and I'm so grateful again for this age of AI learning. And I'm so grateful for my brand and this platform that has served me so well. Not so much, it's a gift that, I'm bringing. I'd like to think of it as a gift, my experiences, because I know for a fact that I am not the only one who has had these experiences, and not just these experiences, but worse experiences, right? And I thought, right, this might serve. So again, not to talk myself out of coming with the topic, because I didn't know. I was so enthralled with the houses and the neighborhood and my walk that right, I didn't even give any thought to the topic of energy. So I'm pretty much right coming in fresh, and whatever you're getting is just going to be what's flowing, and a couple of notes because of the content that came across my path that were so bang on the topic of energy that I had no choice. There was no backing out of it, right? I had to come in and talk about energy. Some of those things that happened today. Oh, my trigger. But we'll tell that one last, right? Um, Gary V, right? Talking about getting the poison out of our systems, right? That he was talking to a gentleman who had absolutely everything. He made it, his business. He was a success to other people's standards. He had a beautiful family and children. He had everything that you could possibly think that would make him any normal person, right? Happy and proud. And he was saying because of his own childhood, right, that he felt none of that. He felt no pride. He felt no joy. And he felt like a total failure in that. And it was so like, oh my goodness, right? And there's Gary V, right? Being the motivational, inspirational, and such great insights, right? Because he says, you got to get that poison out of your system, right? Lots of us have crappy childhoods, and lots of us have been done wrong in our lives. Lots of time it's unintentional, right? Even my own father hurt me, right? But it was good, with good intent that he had, but he didn't realize where I was at in the moment, or what I was coming out of in another experience, that he shared his insights, and it bit me in a way that, right, and I held on to that, and it made me feel bad. But right, as you grow older, as you delve into the whys of things, you get to understand, right, that wasn't intentional, right? It was the intent. Right, because we all have that too, when somebody just sets out just to dig into you, just to bite a piece out of you, just because they're miserable themselves. But you can even forgive that, because what are they miserable about? What happened in their own life that put them in that state to make them do that, right? But that's the thing. It's that negative state that leaves us open, right? When we are in that state ourselves, it's even happened to me, oh, so many times, when I've been negative, and I ended up being the vehicle, right? The vessel for something to come in and trigger somebody else to say something unkind or do something unkind to somebody else. It wasn't my intent, but I believe it was something's intent. But because I was in a negative state, right? Because I left myself open in that state, I became a vessel for somebody or something else to come in. I've got to take responsibility for that because I allowed myself to get negative, and that's energy, right? There's positive energy and there's negative energy, but energy is energy, right? And right, the good energy is not going to come in when you're in that state. The only energy that can come in and use you as a vessel, right? That can make it so that you trip up, that you make a fool of yourself, that you become something or someone that hurts others. And whether it's with intent or not intent, right? I have to take responsibility for that happening. Lots of times we hurt people, right? And we we don't intend to do that. It's because we get triggered in our own pain, in our own heartbreak, in our own experiences in our life, right? And we can stay in that pain and miserableness and resentfulness or jealousy, which was a big one in my family, right? That we can leave ourselves wide open and we can end up cannibalizing each other. I've seen those experiences and those relationships, right? And I've seen the singular going after the positive. And even I'm going to have to say, I did it in my own life. And a prime example of that is in my marriage, right? My marriage falling apart. My husband met somebody thin, beautiful, happy, experiencing a life that she had never experienced in her whole life, and I was just shining like a diamond, right? And my husband fell for that. But you know, in my inexperience in being a girlfriend, right, being a wife, uh right, I allowed that negativity to come into my life. And in order to cope with that, I gambled, right? Because I could see that my life was uncomfortable and it was supposed to be the happiest time in my entire life, and for the most part it was. But there were times when I didn't feel good about myself, when I was gambling, and you know, I would spend all my money on those video lottery terminals, and then I would lie to my husband about, why I wasn't bringing home money, cuz he had plans the next day, and we shared the pot both ways. We were both making good money. I worked in bars and nightclubs. My husband was in the military. And I felt like I wasn't pulling my fair share. And not only did I feel that way, I was overcompensating in my relationship to my husband by being more than what I could really be for him. And he saw me stumbling over myself for him. But I know he saw me lying. I'm not saying see me lying, catch me lying, but he could see in my negativity, in that energy that I was. And he read energy, right? And he was woke. I wasn't, right? At that time, I had no clue. He was just in love with my light. And when that light went out, our marriage fell apart, right? And I fell apart even harder, and I went into a really dark state. And in that dark state, there was no chance for the light to come in, for that energy, that wonderful, beautiful energy to come into my life. The only reason it came into my life to start with is because I had lost 160 pounds. I was a very big girl, right? And, for the first time in my life, I was getting attention from men and I felt beautiful and I had a good job and I was making good money. That energy just came into my life and just it was like Cinderella, and I'm not even joking about that, right? I became the own poison in my marriage, and my marriage fell apart, and right, it was a big reason as to why my marriage fell apart because I lost that light. My energy turned dark. Now let's come back to the present, right? In my experiences in my life with negative energy and positive energy, because I had a lot of positive energy come into my life, right? I had my father, I had my passions, I had, right, that bit of stubbornness in my life to say, despite what anybody said, I was going to create the best life for myself as I possibly could. Now I say something a little bit different. I say, now I'm creating the best human being I possibly can, knowing that I'm only human. I really am. I understand I'm a human soul, but I live in a world of humans, right? And the people I love the most part, they're only human, right? And it's important for me to stay positive, right? It's important for me to do the work, right? To delve into those problems that I had and to recognize, like I recognize what happened in my marriage, why it all fell apart, right? Allowing myself to be wide open in my coping mechanisms, but in gaining weight again and in lying to my husband and juggling my house bills and being in an addiction of gambling, right? An addiction of food. And in all honesty, my addiction of food is still there. I adapt, I conquer, right? In this moment, I've eliminated so much of my wonderful yummies that, right, that just help me to settle in to my own self. But I understand that when I gorge like that, when I do that to myself, I put myself in that negative state. My whole family does that. All my sisters do that. We all cope with the food that way. I even had this conversation with my sister, right? She is up and down and in and out of diets all the time. And she is 100 times worse than I ever was in the way she talks to herself, how she treats herself when she, right, can't get into her clothes or she thinks she's, right, not beautiful. And my sisters, they're all beautiful, right? They're all beautiful. But we treat ourselves so badly. We treat ourselves worse than what anybody else can do to us, right? We pick up that baton that might have been projected on us, but we now have grown into that and we pick up that baton and we don't need anybody to say fat. So we don't need anybody to say we don't look good in a bathing suit or my beautiful Hindi dress. Like, right? we treat ourselves badly. And I said to my sister, the only way that you can resolve, it's not about, if you could just be happy with the way you look and the way you feel, I would say be 300 pounds, right? Be a chubby. But you can't talk to yourself kindly. You can't think of yourself kindly, right? So the only thing you can do is to diet and to keep the weight off, because that's the only way you can feel good about yourself. Or you could do the shadow work. My sisters don't understand shadow work. They don't, right? They don't think this way. They don't move this way. Right? I have the conversations, and right, my sister understands it's all about the way she talks about herself, right? And she gets that she doesn't have a choice, but she has another choice, doesn't she? She can do that shadow work. She could learn to love herself the way she is, right? She has a beautiful man that loves her, right? She doesn't want to be in a bikini anyway, even if she weighed 90 pounds. She's not just not that person, right? And she's not big on wearing fancy, beautiful clothes all the time. But because of the way she was brought up, because of her own limiting beliefs and insecurities, right? That energy is there, right? And the only way for her to resolve it is to resolve it. That's the only answer for her, unless she wants to put in the work. And lots of people don't want to put in the work. Lots of people would just love just to stay in the coping mechanisms. They would just love just to, right, beat themselves up, make them feel miserable. But that only serves the negative, and that only leaves yourself open for whatever or whoever to come in and direct. And if it's negative, that's the only thing that can come in, because the good does not surface, right? Only the negative will surface. And we all have negative aspects of ourselves, and we all have positive aspects of ourselves. And if you say differently, I'm going to say liar, right? So let's get back in to tonight. I come home and I say, well, I'm feeling pretty good, but let's sit down and relax and wait until the buzzing in my feet kind of mellow out. And then we'll do the live show. We'll go in and we'll do the live show, right? And so I made myself some dinner. I made myself a cup of coffee, and I drank two glasses of juice because I was so dehydrated. And I took a big can of that mango pineapple brisk. Oh, it's so good, and only 15 calories, you guys. It's so amazing. If you haven't tried the new brisk, it's an iced tea. If you haven't tried it, oh my goodness, you should try it. It's so good. Um, yeah, so anyway, back to tonight, and I came home. And what do? Of course, I'm going into the lessons, right? And took in a few lessons, and I came across, oh no, I didn't come across that one yet. I came into some shorts, and one of these shorts triggered me so bad. I have not been triggered like that since before I left my job. And right, and it triggered me, and not just triggered me, I was angry. I was, oh my goodness. And I said yesterday, I think, in my live show that, I'm not really big about getting in and being a participant in the comments and giving my insights and stuff. I usually just take in the lessons and I move along to the next lesson, right? But this woman, oh, she got me. She came in and she goes, "Shame on you." My head just blew up as soon as she started talking about it. I'm not doing it word for word, but she's saying, "Shame on you. Your parents put a roof over your head and put food on the table and didn't give you gave you insights and gave you your time and brought you up, and how dare you speak to them without that respect." And I'm thinking, my brain just blew up. I got triggered so bad, and not so bad for myself, but that saying to people, and when I'm trying to counteract that, when I'm trying to help people to move out of their complex trauma from those batteries and abuse that they grew up in. And if you want to say that that wasn't battery and abuse, I'm going to say shame on you. Shame on you, because when you do it, you know what you're doing, because you've left yourself open, because only a negative person would do that to another human soul. Another human soul, right? Not just a human being, a human soul. And it was awful. And I commented, I said, "How dare you?" I can't even, I was so messed up in my brain, right? That I don't even know what I said, but I remember I said, "How dare you? How dare you make something that happened to another human seem insignificant? And how dare you make somebody, by shaming them, right, and guilting them out and second guessing their experience, right? Because we know it. When that evil is there, there's a difference between negative and evil. But when you leave yourself open, you're leaving yourself open for the evil. That evil that wants to take you out. That same evil where we pick up the baton and do that to ourselves, that comes in and does that to us. And then what happens, right? We've had some lessons. We've done some work on ourselves. We've done the work. And just to be recognized that, oh my goodness, right? We got triggered. We got triggered so bad that I had to go into that woman's, I don't have no idea who she was. I had to go back into that woman's post and give her a piece of my mind, right? How dare you, right? Make somebody's painful, scary, very significant, very damaging experience seem like it was nothing. And not even seem like it was nothing, but make it their fault. Make that person seem ungrateful, right? Make that person feel like they were the bad person. And when I say that, I 100% mean it. I'm just even talking about it now. You guys can feel me, feel that, right? That's just a horrible thing, right? And I went, oh my goodness. And then instantly I felt bad, right? But I didn't feel bad for what I did, right? And going into her comments and giving her a piece of my mind and setting her straight, right? And hopefully it made an impact. I doubt it, right? Because she believed what she was dishing out. I'm sure she believed. She felt like she believed. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been triggered like that. I would have just been, oh, silly lady, right? You have no idea what you're talking about. Poor girl, right? One day she'll wake up. One day she'll have that right? And I would have done that for her. I know the difference between right and wrong. I know the difference between good and evil. Why? Because I come from the two extremes myself. Because I've had those experiences for myself that I feel, oh my goodness, I feel better now because, right, I do feel like I have the position to talk about energy because I've been in that energy my entire life. Every time I left myself in that state, and I was in that state almost my entire life, right? In my adulthood, I picked up that baton and I did it to myself, but in my childhood, that was projected onto me. And in my negativeness, nothing good could have come out of that, right? I could have been here much sooner. Maybe not on YouTube, but I might have been woke to different ideas. I might have been somebody that could have achieved their dreams. I might have been the evidence for somebody a long time ago, right? Better late than never, I say, right? Better late than never. I'm here now. But if anybody ever thinks that they're going to demean my experience, my true experience, and my insights and my experiences of experiencing both extremes, the good and the bad, the good and the evil, right? Even the good and the righteous, right? Because the righteous is somebody that believes that they're good, that believes that what they're saying is the truth, what their experience is the truth. But sometimes in being righteous, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to learn from somebody else's experience. And that's the truth. And it took bravery because I'd never spoken about the energy, right? That was my little trick of the trade, my little bit of insight because, you know, in I'm going to use my last job as an experience. For the first time in my life, uh, I really enjoyed my job. I loved my job so much. I really loved my boss too. She was a narcissist from hell. I really loved my boss. She was because she was so straight up. And not only was she a narcissist, but she knew her stuff. She was an expert in what she was saying and doing, and she would never ask anybody to do anything she wouldn't do herself, right? I would follow her to the ends of the earth and she said, Cindy, I need help, but I would be there in a moment. But I had that opportunity to sit with her and talk about my childhood a little bit and talk about triggers, right? And she knew my triggers and she still got angry with me. She was still loud and obnoxious sometimes, but such a good heart. That woman had such a good heart. Uh, when she'd get angry with me, she would take me off to the side. She would come up to me and she would look at me and point at me in my face. She'd go, Cindy, I'm about to yell at you. So at the very least, she would give me the pre-warning because I didn't know everything. I made big mistakes lots of times. I'm not perfect, right? But she would give me the heads up that I was going to get a course correction. Life gets to us. Sometimes it's wrenches, sometimes it's beautiful miracles come into our life, and she deserved a beautiful miracle. She did, right? And an experience came into her life and she had to leave the store and I was heartbroken. I loved her. I loved her so much and we were a good team. We ran that We ran that ship like that, bringing in the money. The customers were happy. She did her thing, I did my thing, and we trusted each other to do the right thing. We were a team, right? But that team broke up, and she did me the kindness of sitting down with the new leader of that team, and she explained to me my triggers. She explained to her my triggers, and how to work with me, uh, and just told her everything so that she was prepared, and so that we could have the same opportunity to have the same relationship, but in her own life, right? There were things going on, and it's personal, right? And it was sad. And again, in those negative states that we are in, right? Sometimes we are the vessel and the porthole for something else, and that something else can only be the negative, right? When we're in the positive, right? That positive comes in, and I'm so grateful for the lessons, right? Because I've been so graced with the positive. I'm so graced with that amazing energy, right? And again, it's not always perfect, right? But it's always getting better because I'm always willing to course correct. I'm always willing to follow the serendipities and the breadcrumbs and take in the lessons and be course corrected, right? But yeah, that energy, those triggers, they got to be used as weapons. And that's what I recognize. It's what I I experienced in this new relationship, that right, in faith, good faith, right? And trust, it was shared what those triggers were. And they were shared so that we could find better ways to work with each other. And right, and it wasn't better ways at that time, it was good ways, right? How we could be good team players and how we can keep the store running amazingly and stuff. And from the very first moment, right, they were used as weapons against me, and I recognized it, and it was heartbreaking. And in that moment, I knew, right, that I was going to have a different experience. And I loved my job. There were so many aspects of that job that I absolutely loved. But, right, I knew that it wasn't going to last, just like so many of those other jobs that I had, right? That I didn't share what triggered with me, only because I did know that they would be used as weapons against me, right? And at the same token, still being in those, and at that time, I didn't have those addictions. I had already quit gambling. I was so positive. I was deep in the lessons, right? Right? And I was still shining, but the more I shined, the more I was triggered, and it was a lose situation because I could have shined in her life. I could have shined in the problems and in the negative that she was in, but right, we weren't meant to be a part of each other's team. And one of us had to go. I did my very best, and there were opportunities and little breaks in between that I was able, right, to hold on as long as I could. But in the end, I couldn't do it anymore, right? Because it was putting me back into that negative, and I right, and I couldn't be delving into old coping mechanisms, and I couldn't be allowing myself to be open because right, because I am from the two extremes, right? As much as the good can come in, the negative could come in, right? So today were lessons for me in, right? I haven't got all the lessons sorted out, right? My life is going to be an experience and an experiment, right? Of resolving what hurt me, right? And resolving the negative and surrounding myself. I hear it all the time, surround yourself with positive people, right? But I don't live in a world, in my own little world, where there is a lot of positive. There isn't, right? There are common courtesies, and I'm probably, right, as about as positive it gets. It's not that I don't bump into people on their own journeys, but they're not necessarily doing the work, right? They're not even human souls anymore. They're souls because the human was so broken that the human just was taken out of the equation. And that ain't happening with me. I am a human soul. I am light. I am dark. I am good. I have been bad, and I probably will trip up in that. But we have to look at the intent. We have to look at the intent, and we have to be open to the possibilities that in that triggering of each other, what was the force, right? Was it the human that did that to us? Or was it that whatever or whoever that found a way to enter in because that person was in a negative state to start with, right? So, one more thing before I end this. This is a big one, you guys. I've never talked about energy before, right? Especially understanding that I'm in the middle, right? And as we move forward in our evolution, eventually, I don't see a lot of it, but I see some, right? And well, I'm not going to say some. I see a lot, but I don't see the recognition that it's both, right? I just see people, beautiful human souls like my sister who beat themselves up because they gain a pound, right? And in gaining that pound they leave themselves open, and then right, they're just in a bad mood and right? But in that bad mood, right, she could crank at me. She could divvy a little bit out to me, but I have to recognize, is that her or is that something else, right? And that's why it's important to look at the intent. And if you see that intent, we also have to recognize that the human has to take responsibility for that because they allowed themselves to be in the negative. And that's a tough one, right? That's a tough call to make because how do you come out of the negative when your mother has died or your father has died or somebody has cancer or somebody has, right, decided they don't want to be here anymore? That, right, that affects everybody, but we're just not all there yet. But I see people out there, right, that recognize that in themselves. And that is the next stage of evolution because the negative is just something that's broken, right? It's just something, right? The people that I want to help, if you want to give them labels, it's the broken empaths and the failed narcissists, right? Because those are the, well, and I'm going to say borderlines too. I'm going to say the borderlines, but the borderlines don't have control. And that's a hard one. I can't get into that mix because it's the borderlines who have done the most damage to me in my life, and that's the truth. But I can work with the narcissist. I get the narcissist. They've been in my life too. But the broken empaths, I can work with the broken empaths because I was a broken empath too. And in some respects, because I got triggered today, I'm still broken in some ways. And because I still cope, not with the pink ice donut, but I ate too many potatoes tonight, right? So we have to recognize in ourselves first, because that negative cannot come into us if we can stay positive. But we have to rub with the negative in order to help the negative, right? Because they have every right to make movement too, right? It's not their fault that, um, the two extremes decided to come together and say a one night stand, right? My parents didn't do it that way, but in this day and age, it's quite common. You have no idea who you're going to bed with. You have no idea, right? You're just looking out for a good time. And the next thing you know, baby comes along and that baby grows up in the two extremes. And maybe, right, those two people have not stayed together and that's just one person. And what if that one person is the negative that's bringing up that child? And that child only has one perspective, right? One perspective to grow up in. And it's not a good one, right? That's not that child's fault. That's not that child's fault. And that child is going to grow up to be borderline, right? Narcissistic or a broken empath because, right, they were partly light at the same time. This is the world that we're living in, and you're going to see more and more and more of this because, right, we're not getting married. We're not staying with the same partners our entire lives. Families are more dynamic than they have ever been, but we are getting pretty smart, right? And as more people come in and have these kind of conversations, right? I would like to think that we're going to get better at understanding, that there will be lessons and organizations that will specifically work with people to help untangle those wires, just like I want to help people untangle those wires. Okay, so one more thing before I take off in this conversation. Just to show that, there is something and someone out there keeping me on track because I could have picked a card. I could have talked myself out of because I've never talked about energy before. I haven't talked about positive energy. I haven't talked about negative energy, but I've shown up with the energies, right? But it was the little cues, it was the experiences, it was getting triggered tonight by that post. It was, right? It was Jordan Peterson, of all people, that came in, and I was just taking in a lesson. I didn't have time to take in the lesson. I've got it saved here. I'm going to go in because, again, I work with what comes across my path, and it came across my path. I watched the first one, and he was talking about the intent. He was talking about people, true evilness. And I don't believe that people can be truly evil in that. I think in our evolution, we have moved beyond that. But in our negativity, we can leave ourselves open, right? And when we leave ourselves open that way, right, negative can come in, right? It's just how it is. And as I move forward and as I become more of my own teacher. I took my own lesson tonight. And I always do. I always come into my own lives and take in the lessons for myself. But it was the first time that YouTube suggested it to me amongst the other things that are being suggested to me. So, well, they've suggested it to me before, but I've never gone into the video when it's done. I don't, right? I just never have before. I probably will do it more now when they do it because I took my lesson and I got my own lesson in that, and I went right into that topic too about it's an appetizer platter out there in the world, and we all get to make choices in that, just like I made that choice to become a gambling addict. And sometimes in our addictions, it's really hard to come out of them. I don't gamble anymore, right? Right? That's something, and I'm so grateful. But that took a lot of lessons. It took a lot of trying. It took a lot of crying. It took my marriage falling apart for me to come out of that. And after that, it took me a long time to come out of that heartbreak, right? And, I'm grateful for the lessons that come across my path that gave me a spark, a moment to pick up a good insight that made me want to try another one and another one and another one. And like I said, right, I still might get triggered for my entire lifetime, but I'm so much better than I was. And I'm going to be so much better than I will ever be. And even if it just takes lifetimes after lifetimes after lifetimes, right? I'm going to get it because that's what evolution is all about, right? I am creating the yet best human being I possibly can, right? The best human being I possibly can. And I think that's all I'm expected to do. Anything else is gravy, sprinkles, right? And cotton candy. You guys, that was a tough one. That took the last of my energy. I hope somebody gets something out of that. I hope somebody understands what I'm saying because, you know, I love who I love, right? And I don't want to be beaten up emotionally, mentally, physically because I love somebody that doesn't meet somebody else's standards or somebody else loves me, right? And I don't meet up to somebody else's standards. Everybody has the right to create the best human being we possibly can. And I don't think that we're supposed to hoard the good lessons just for the good. Because how can the dark, how can the bad, how can that negativity make any movement for themselves if they're not welcome to the party, right? Like I was. Okay, you guys. That's my good cheer. You have a great night.